welcome to episode 171 of Board Game Blitz, a podcast about all things board games that you can listen to in less time than it takes to pick out the perfect gift at your friendly local game store. Board Game Blitz is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. This week, we're talking about organizing your game collection. First, we can discuss a couple games we've played recently, Décorum and FORK. Then, we talk about the many ways you can organize your board games. And now, here are your hosts,
Ambie
and Crystal.
Recently, Crystal and I both got a review copy of Décorum, and we played it together on stream. Yeah. So we actually got a sponsored stream by Floodgate Games, who
because Floodgate Games is awesome.
Yeah. So Décorum is a cooperative deduction game of passive-aggressive cohabitation.
Which is just the best tagline for like a subhead or a tagline for a board game. Like, passive-aggressive cohabitation is just mwah, chef kiss. And I'm a copywriter, so I know these things. It's brilliant.
Yeah. But anyways, it's a cooperative deduction game. You are decorating a house, and each person has like hidden objectives they need to complete for the house. So they have to be like, there's different colors and styles of furniture. There's like lamps, wall paintings, and what are they called? Curios. So you're trying to get like, your secret thing could be like, oh, there has to be 2 yellow objects, or like there has to be 1 green curio, or like the walls on the left side have to be blue, or something like that. And so everyone has different objectives, and then you have to complete all of the people's objectives simultaneously to win. And you can't tell people what your objectives are.
You don't know anyone's objectives but your own, and you can't communicate them directly. But when so you can add items, remove items, or swap items out. And when somebody else makes a change, basically you're only allowed to communicate whether you love it, you hate it, or you're indifferent to it. And of course, we, use different thematic phrases rather than just those specific ones. So when Ambie and I were playing, I was just like, oh my God, that's horrible.
It's so ugly.
But you don't know why the other person thinks something is horrible. And so that's where the deduction comes in, is you need to suss out what they are trying to achieve or not achieve, as it were, depending on the goals. And you're trying to simultaneously fulfill your own objectives while not screwing up the other person's objectives. And we played through the first 3 2-player scenarios, and there are scenarios for 2, 3, and 4 players included in the box. And honestly, I played this game with my friend group a handful of weeks ago, and we played it with more than 2 players, and it was more difficult. This game truly shines at its 2-player player count. And I'm not saying I disliked it at a larger player count. It was fine, but it was way harder. And at 2, it's still difficult, but it felt more achievable and less stressful, even though it was still hard.
For me, it was a lot easier at 2 for me. So I played it we played with 5 players, but it was 4-player scenario, and Toby and I were playing as 1 person because we wanted to try out the game. And this was like back in May, so it was a while ago. But we really liked it. And it's hard because it's hard to keep track of everyone's objectives. So like there was a lot of deduction with the multiplayer. Like people were taking things off and like, oh, okay, I think they have this condition, and then this person has this other condition. And so I was trying to like keep track of all of that in my head, which gets very difficult. But we were able to eventually get it. Also, after 15 rounds of the game, which go by pretty quickly, you get to share conditions with other people. So in the 2-player game, you just like tell the other person one of your conditions. But in the multiplayer game, you pass around the cards because you have condition cards. And so you pass someone else one of your condition cards, and then someone else passes like someone else a condition card. So you can see someone else's conditions. And so you're trying to help them fulfill their condition as well. So on your turn, like, you don't have to only be going for your condition. You want to, like, make sure that other people's conditions are fulfilled, too. And if your condition is closer to being fulfilled than someone else, and you know their stuff, then you can, like, help them. So that was pretty interesting. I think there was more of that in the multiplayer game than in the 2-player game.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely.
But I am excited to play more scenarios because the 2-player game is a campaign game, so I think it gets harder and harder. We only played the 3 scenarios out of 20, so there's a lot, and I'm excited to play those. I wanted to play with Toby because we had played, after we played with the 5 players, which is actually 4 players, we were like, oh, we love this game at 2 players, even though we hadn't played at 2 players. We knew we were going to love it.
You can sometimes just tell.
Yeah. Well, actually, after reading the rules, or after hearing the rules explanation, or maybe even just like the overview, Toby was like, oh, I love this. Like, yeah, so it's one of those games where it's like, oh, you know you're gonna love it.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, we're heading into the holiday season, and, well, we're kind of already in the midst of it, I guess.
Yeah.
And so if you are, you know, somebody who's looking for board game gifts, if you have whether a gamer friend or even a non-gamer friend in your life who really likes deduction games, even if, like, that's, you know, the classic games like Clue and things like that,
or
this
like
one
logic
mechanically is pretty simple. Like, it's really not that difficult to learn. I would not classify this as a gateway game per se, or like an entry-level game, but if you are somebody who understands even like fairly light family weight games, this one's not that hard to pick up and play. So I think it would actually make a really good gift.
Yeah, it's pretty simple because like all you do on your turn is just change one item, basically. So yeah, it's people who like deduction, logic puzzles, that type of thing. And it's fun because it's cooperative. Lots of board games like Clue and stuff, the deduction board games, they're not cooperative. So this is very unique because it's a cooperative deduction game. You're not like working against other people trying to race to complete it. You're working with other people and trying to like help in deductions, which is neat.
So that was Décorum, designed by Charlie Mackin, Harry Mackin, Drew Tenenbaum, and published by Floodgate Games. I recently got a preview copy of a game that's going to be coming to crowdfunding in January. It is a trick-taking game designed by Tate Wu, published by Sunrise Tornado Game Studio, and it is called Fork. Fork like the utensil, but technically the letters F-O-R-K stand for fox, owl, rabbit, kale. This is a food chain trick-taking game. Oh. So fox eats the owl, eats the rabbit, eats the kale. I got to meet Tate at Dice Tower West, and I knew that Tate really liked trick-taking games, and when he told me that he was designing this one and told me a little bit about it, I was very excited to try it out. You all know I love trick-taking games, especially unique ones, and this... It is wild to me how trick-taking games can be so vastly different when they're all kind of based on this, you know, core mechanism, basically. And so in Fork, what happens is players are playing cards from their hand in different terrains, which are basically the suits in the game. And then the active player gets to call out which terrain is being played that round. And then other players do have to follow suit if they can. And most of the cards get played face down rather than being face up. So the only type of card that's played face up is kale. So if you play kale, which is at the bottom of the food chain, you do play it face up, but everything else is played face down. And then once the cards are revealed, if someone played a fox, they can score an owl or a rabbit. Once that's resolved, if there are any owls left, they can score any rabbits that are left. Once that is resolved, then any rabbits that have been played can score kale that was played. And if, after all of that has happened, there's any kale left, the player who played that kale gets to take it back and score it themselves.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Yeah, and so the animals have different numerical values on them, and so if, like, let's say there is one owl and two rabbits, only one of the rabbits, so it is possible to, like, even if you know or you think you know what someone else is going to do, you can kind of, like, meta game it and, like, be like, okay, so I think they're gonna play a rabbit, but if I play a rabbit of this value, then it should be safe, and then I can eat the kale, but then there'll be like 3 rabbits, and it all goes haywire quickly, and you're like, oh wait, all the kale's gone now. There's nothing for me to eat. So it works surprisingly well and feels very different than most trick-taking games that I've ever played. And then once a player has collected a certain number of cards, scored a certain number of cards, the game ends. This can be played with anywhere from 2 to 6 players. Once you get into the higher player counts, you are playing in teams, but it is just so much fun. And like the moments where you're like, okay, I know I'm good, and then everybody flips their cards over, and you're like, no, they ate my owl, because the foxes are wild, so they can be played out of suit, and each player only has one fox in their hand, and so like the foxes are very powerful, but if 2 foxes get played at the same time, they don't get to score anything. And so there's a lot of little nuances to the rules like that just make this a delight. I am so happy that I have a copy of it, and I would highly recommend, if you are a person like me who enjoys trick-taking games, this is coming to crowdfunding in January, and you can sign up to get notified when it goes live, I believe, on the publisher's website. So I'm grateful that Tate sent me a copy of this one, and I'm super excited to keep playing it. That is Fork, the food chain trick-taking game designed by Tate Wu.
That sounds pretty neat, because like the tricks, instead of getting all of the trick, you split it up. So that's like...
Yeah, like there is no like one person claims all of it. It's it gets divvied up.
How many people did you play at?
We played with 3 and 4 players when we played it. Okay, yeah. Cool. So I haven't played it at 2 yet. I'm curious to know how it would play at 2.
It seems like there would be less of there's less clash between.
Yes, like, I think, and I believe there are rule differences in that player count as well that I didn't look into. But yeah, it's nice to have games like this that have a wider player count, because a lot of trick-taking games are like 4 players only, and it's like, that's all well and good, except I don't have 3 friends that want to play Teach You with me all the time. So, like, I love Teach You, never get to play it, because you have to have 3 other friends who know how to play Teach You, and that just does not happen for me very often. Ambie, there are a lot of things in my life that I am really, really good at. Like, I'm pretty talented in a lot of ways, but there is one thing I am horrible at. Do you know what that is?
Is it organizing board games?
Oh, it's organizing anything. Oh. Like, organization and we are not friends. I wish we were. I would love to get to know her. I don't know her at all. And so, like most of my belongings, my board games do not tend to be well organized at any given time. So we are going to just talk today about ways that you can organize your board game collection, and hopefully I'm going to, I don't know, gain some insights about myself and figure out what I want to do going forward with my own collection as it continues to grow.
Theoretically, how would you organize your
Right, like this is just me, like this is a secret way for me to try and figure out what to actually do with my own stuff.
Yeah. So I thought of this topic because holiday seasons are coming up. I've been getting a lot of new games, even though I shouldn't.
I'm doing the same thing. I have so many games that I need to get played, and then like my friend will message me and be like, "Hey, this store is having a sale," and I'm like, "Oh no!"
And then the new games just end up on my table, on the side of my table, because we are out of space in our Calyx shelf.
And you all have been very diligent over the years about like, you know, culling your collection and getting rid of games that you don't play anymore. So
that's another thing, because our big cull is at the end of the year, so that's coming up too. So we're gonna like go through all of our games and like reorganize them and then like cull them too. So that we do that every year, so they get organized every year pretty much. And I think that's
a good thing to note, right? Is getting rid of games can be beneficial in helping you organize the ones that you're keeping, because inevitably, as you go through them, you will kind of just, by the nature of going through everything, reorganize it.
Yeah. But people have different ways of organizing their games. I've seen people organize by like color, which is really pretty.
It's so pretty, but it's just like there's no other usefulness to organizing that way other than it's pretty. And if you don't remember the color of a particular box, like I know that Castell is yellow, so like there are certain games that like I would know exactly where to find them, but there are other boxes I'm like, I don't remember the color of that. And then what would I do with Strike, because I own the old version, which is in a purple box, and the new version, which is in a yellow box, so now do I have to split up my versions of Strike? Like, what? I can't do that.
Yeah. I also do not do color. I actually organize by like type of game, kind of. So I have like the party games, the 2-player games, the Vital Lacerda games.
I love that Vital Lacerda gets his own category just because
we have enough games to fit a shelf for him.
Yeah.
Real-time cooperative games, right? Other cooperative games, like children's games, 18xx games. So like we have those kind of, and then all the small box games are kind of like in the same shelf because they're small and they just kind of like all fit in one shelf.
I do something similar, but I've found even when I put them all together, I don't lose as in they're gone forever, but like I lose a mental grasp on some of the small box games that I own because they're all together and I can't visually see them as clearly as some of the larger games. And I kind of forget that some of them exist, even ones that I really like. Or especially like sometimes when I travel more frequently, obviously pre-pandemic, I was keeping some of my small box games in my quivers, which shout out to Quiver Time. Their products are amazing. If you ever want to travel with games, their products are absolutely fabulous. But when I keep games in a quiver, again, my brain just kind of forgets that they exist. I mean, that's ADHD brain at its finest, basically. But like, if I can't see a thing, it doesn't exist to me anymore.
Yeah, that happens with us too. Like our small box games, we have some behind the ones in front too. So like, and in our party game shelf too, it's kind of like overlapped in the small party games. So we have like some in the back and then some in the front. And then the ones in the front we see and play more. But then like the ones in the back, we completely forgot about them. I think last year when we were doing our Cole, we like found some games in the back. We're like, wait, we still have this game? Like, what? And we're like, huh. And so, yeah, sometimes we just have games back hiding.
Well, okay, so you bring up a very interesting point, and I think it is one of the reasons that some people... I own a Kallax, you also own Kallax shelves, and a lot of hobby board gamers own this particular shelving unit from IKEA.
Yeah.
It used to be called something else, and then they renamed it the Kallax. Is it Besta? Is that right?
No, I thought it started with an E. I don't remember what it was called.
Regardless, a lot of gamers own this shelf, but I have heard people say it's kind of a waste because the shelves are deeper than most board games, and so you end up technically not utilizing all the space on the shelves because it, like you said, if you put games in front of other games to utilize all the space, now you can't see the games that are behind, which, like, isn't that the point of having a shelving unit, is to see the things? Because if you wanted to put your books and your board games in a box and store them that way, you wouldn't be able to see any of them. The whole point of having a shelf is to see the stuff. So if you're now stacking multiple layers, you don't get to see them that way either. So I do understand why some people are not keen on the Kallax for that reason, but aside from that, it is a nice boxy shelving unit that happens to fit most standard board games pretty nicely.
It used to be called the Expedit. That was
okay. I wonder if Besta is like the version from a different company that is similar looking or something, because it's in my head, but I don't know what it is.
Oh, and another reason this discussion came up is that I'm in the Foster the Meeple Discord. They're a YouTube channel that talks about board games. Jeff and Jamie, it's fun to watch them. Go
check out their content. They're awesome. So yes.
But yes, in their Discord channel, they started a topic of the day, and then one of them was do you have, like, what are your display games? And I was like, what's that? But then people are talking about, like, they have their games like facing out, so it's just like taking up the whole box of the shelf, just in the front. But then they have
like
games
the front of the box rather than the side.
So instead of having it sideways like bookshelf type, you have it facing forward so you see the front of the box, and then it looks really nice. And so people were showing pictures, and I'm like, oh, that looks really nice. But like, if I did that, then I would just forget the boxes behind it.
Right, because, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, when I play games, like we are always like, okay, what game should we play? And then we all just like look at the shelf and like look at all the games.
We do the exact same thing.
So it would be hard to remember. Although I guess since I organize by type, it might be not as hard because like I have all the real-time cooperative games, and then I could just have like a real-time cooperative game in the front that's embodies all the real-time cooperative games. So it's like, okay, we want to play this type of game, and then you pull it back and look at it or something. I don't know.
Well, and your collection is smaller than mine, at least. And so I think that makes sense. Like, I think you might be able to pull that off, but like I own too many games. And so even if I tried to do them category-wise, I know I would still forget about some of the ones that were back behind. So then I'd be like, okay, let's pull this off and look. And yeah, I have considered doing the display game thing and having like, because it does look really pretty.
It does look nice, yeah.
But the thing is, nobody's walking through my dining room that often, so like, I don't do the content in front of a board game wall typically, so I don't really have a reason to do it that way.
Yeah, I also don't film in there anymore, and I think when I did film in there, people liked looking at, like, seeing all of the games I had rather than just like some of them. So
yeah. So for me, the way again, lack of organization is my life, but I do have some semblance of organization to the games that I currently own. For me, a lot of the like really old vintage games are all up on top of the Kallax, mostly because the box sizes back in the 80s and 90s were large and weird, and so they don't fit anywhere else. So those end up stacked on top of everything. Same thing for some of the more modern, like huge games like Return to Dark Tower and Descent, the latest edition. Like those boxes are just gigantic, and so I just throw them up on top. Admittedly, getting them down from up there can be very scary, and so I have to be careful. But so far, no accidents in that regard. And then, like you, I have a section of, like, small box games that are all kind of grouped together. And then, inevitably, that sucks when I need to grab one that's, like, on the bottom of the stack, because I, like, have to maneuver it out without toppling everything over.
Yeah.
And for the rest of my games, I kind of tend to some degree, go top to bottom games that I either play a lot or want to play soon near the top. And then toward the bottom is stuff that I don't play as frequently, or like sometimes I have games that I really know I'm not going to play that often, but I'm keeping for various reasons like nostalgia or they're rare or hard to find, that kind of stuff. Like that tends to go to the bottom of the shelves for me just because then I don't need that visual reminder of those.
That's funny. Like once I got kids, the rare things went to the top.
Oh, no, that's a good point.
Yeah. So yeah, they went out of reach. So all the 18xx games I had to move up because they used to be like more all on one side and like filling the shelves from top to bottom, and then I had to move them up more. And then now there's a bunch of children's games, and I've been getting like the children's games are overflowing because I'm like, ooh, this one's cool, I want to get this for them. But
I mean, they like them, so there's no reason not to, right?
They don't play them enough to warrant having like 20 games.
I mean, do any of us play games enough to warrant having how many we actually have? Like, if we're being honest, at least for me, I do not need as many games as I own.
Yes,
like, even though I play games a lot, I do not need this many.
That is true, yeah. And yeah, so our shelves are overflowing. All the new games we have, I just have on the table or like on the floor.
Oh, yeah, no, I have games on the table and on the floor also, for sure.
But yeah, so that's the goal of our goal, is to have it so that everything fits on the shelf. But if I do the display box, then I fit more boxes on the shelf because I'll have like the regular boxes and then one in front. So one more will fit on each shelf.
Okay, that's a reason to do that strategy, if nothing else then, because you get to store more games. So what are some other ways that people could consider if they are looking to organize their collection?
So something that I saw about children's games that I think most board gamers would not do because it involves getting rid of the box is it was like someone organizing their children's games and toys and stuff. And so it makes sense, like you have kids' toys, you throw away the box, right? Like the Legos or whatever, you put them in a bag or in a bin and throw away the box. So like they had the board game stuff in like a big Ziploc or something, and then just like had it in a filing cabinet of the different board game things in bags, and they don't have the boxes anymore, which I mean, I guess is like very space saving, but like for people who collect board games, that's like not something that they would want to do because they like keeping the board game box.
It literally gives me anxiety just hearing that, but it totally makes logical sense.
Yeah.
Especially because boxes get damaged easily, especially when kids are a factor, right? Like the games that I have from my childhood, the corners of those boxes are wrecked.
And some of those boxes, especially the ones from our childhood, they weren't really made to like keep putting it back in. Like Hungry Hippos did not fit back in the box when I was a kid. Like that box is just I don't know, like not fit. So yeah, it could make sense getting rid of some of those boxes.
That's true.
But nowadays, a lot of modern board games have nicer boxes that are meant to be kept.
I mean, I do miss the days of where you would turn the box over and on the back was always the like most generic looking family with the cheesy smiles, like playing the game, sitting at a table. And even to this day, I still don't understand, like, were people confused about what a board game was? Because what is that picture actually, like, what is its purpose? Is it like, do people pick up this box and go, well, what is this thing? I don't understand. Monopoly. And they turn it around and they see a picture of a family sitting at a table. They're like, oh, this is a family activity. Like, was that confusing? at some point, because all of the games in the 80s had that same generic family on the back of the box smiling at the camera. I'm just saying.
Well, you got to see the game setup usually, right? So
I mean, but like in those pictures, the game is an afterthought. You can barely see, like you can see it sitting on the table, but that's about it. You can definitely sort games based on their usability and how they play to some degree. Sometimes when I'm meeting up with my friends, we are kind of looking for a game that is a specific length of time to play. So I've considered grouping games based on like, okay, these games are 30 minutes or less or 15 minutes or less. And these games are 3+ hours. You know, if we're looking for something chonky, go over here. But in practice, I've never really found that to look good aesthetically because, I mean, the long games do tend to come in bigger boxes to some degree, but everything else kind of runs the gamut. And so I don't want to have, I do want how my games are displayed to make sense visually. It doesn't have to be like color matching, but I don't want to be like big box, tiny box, medium box, all on the same shelf because it messes with my brain.
I guess one thing you could do if you have a lot of games is like get help with digital apps. Because if you log your collection on Board Game Geek, there's a lot of apps that connect with that. And then I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I think there's some there that you can like filter your collection by length, number of players, mechanics, things like that. And so it can help you pick a game so you can organize your collection however you want. And then maybe if you have some sort of, or I guess you could do it like alphabetically or something, or like if you know where, maybe you can log which shelf has which games and stuff. And then with an app like that, you would be able to find it. I don't know.
I like the idea of organizing them alphabetically because you still see them visually and you can find things easily.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of the time.
Game?
Oh, yeah.
That's why
honestly, all of these strategies, because like when I do organize, I tend to like utilize all of the space in a given cubby. So as soon as I get a new game, everything is ruined, basically.
That's true. Well, like we would used to like just put it on top. Because there would be space on top.
I just like, for me, a big, massive organization is a rarity. And so once I've done it, I don't want to have to do it again soon.
Yeah. So no buying any new games after you organize.
Yeah. You know, this is definitely an important discussion because I don't know about you, but chances are over the holidays, I will either get games as gifts or buy them for myself because... you know, things go on sale around the holidays. So I'm definitely going to be looking for ways to maximize my storage space and make my collection even more usable than it currently is. I would love to hear from our listeners what they do when they organize their games. Do you just throw them on the shelves haphazardly? Or do you have a very specific system that you use to organize your games? And then what do you do when you get a new game? Do you throw it in? Do you reorganize? What do you do? So let us know on social media or our Discord channel what you all do when you're organizing your board game collection.
And that's it for this week's Board Game Blitz. Visit our website, boardgameblitz.com, for video and blog content, as well as to get links to all our social media pages. This episode was sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Bazaars of Ubar, the newest game from the designer of OrgaNICEing, is on Kickstarter now. Compete to be the ultimate merchant of the Atlantis of the Sands in this fantastical engine-building game. And if you need to do some holiday shopping, don't forget that Blitzketeers get 20% off non-exclusive items at greyfoxgames.com when you use the code GFGBLITZ2022 at checkout. Join the Blitzketeer community on Discord by following the link in the show notes. This holiday season, give us the gift of a written review and rating on iTunes or Spotify. And visit patreon.com/boardgameblitz to get behind-the-scenes access to the show and an invite to our private Slack channel. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Morrow. Technical support provided by Toby Now. Until next time. Last game night, we played my new game, but the very next day, I realized my shame. I fear the rules weren't adhered, so I'll have to reread the rule book. Bye, everyone! Bye!
I love that you're laughing at your own coughs.
No.